Today, we are diving into a really powerful weapon in the fight against some of the absolute deadliest internal fungal infections that doctors face. We're talking about Caspofungin, a drug that really fundamentally changed how we treat these invasive threats. So let's dive in and see how this thing actually works. Okay, so here's the big problem, right? Fungal cells are what we call eukaryotes, which, is exactly what our own cells are. This makes them incredibly tricky to target without causing a ton of collateral damage to us, the patient. So how on earth do you design a drug that can tell the difference between us and them? And this slide right here just lays out the answer perfectly. It all comes down to one critical, game-changing difference. See, both our cells and fungal cells have a cell membrane, but fungi, they had this extra layer of armor on the outside, a rigid cell wall. Our cells, we don't have that at all. And that one single feature, that's the Achilles heel that Caspofungin was built to exploit. Now let's be crystal clear about the kind of threat we're actually up against here. This is so important to understand. We are not talking about some over-the-counter cream for athlete's foot. No way. This is a heavy hitter, an intravenous drug that's reserved for the most serious situations you can imagine, like invasive infections caused by Candida or Aspergillus, usually in patients who are already incredibly sick or have weakened immune systems. So when the stakes are that high, you can't just throw anything at the problem. You need a smarter weapon. And that's exactly what Caspofungin and its whole class of drugs called the echinocandins turned out to be. Let me show you what I mean. The older drugs like amphotericin B, they went after the cell membrane, that structure that we share with fungi. And sure, it worked, but it was kind of like carpet bombing. It caused a lot of collateral damage, especially to the kidneys. Caspofungin, on the other hand, is like a precision strike. It goes right for that cell wall, the thing our cells don't have, which gives it this incredible selectivity and a much, much better safety profile. So we're calling it a precision strike, but how does it actually work? How does it manage to take down that fungal armor? It all comes down to this one molecule right here, beta-1,3-D-glucan. The best way to think about this is as the molecular rebar of the fungal cell wall. It is the essential scaffolding that gives the wall all of its strength and its structure. And what happens next is almost elegant in how simple and deadly it is. It's basically a four-step takedown. First, the drug tracks down the fungus. Then it slams the brakes on the enzyme that acts as the rebar factory. Without that rebar, the cell wall just gets weak and flimsy. And finally, the pressure inside the cell just becomes too much for that weakened wall to handle, and boom, the fungal cell literally bursts. It's a really clean and lethal takedown. The source material had a line that just nails this analogy perfectly. Trying to build a fungal cell wall without beta-glucan is exactly like trying to build a concrete wall without any steel rebar inside. The second you put any real pressure on it, the whole thing just crumbles. So we know how it works. But let's talk about the who. Who is on its hit list? Because, and this is important, it doesn't work on every fungus out there. This table lays it out great. Against Candida species, it's an absolute killer. We call that fungicidal. It's often a first-line treatment even for strains that are resistant to other drugs. Now, against Aspergillus, its effect is more about just stopping it in its tracks. We call that fungostatic, which makes it a fantastic salvage therapy when other treatments have failed. But then you look at that bottom row, and nothing. It's completely ineffective against fungi like Cryptococcus or the zeomycetes. Why? Well, they simply don't use this specific kind of rebar in their cell walls. Okay, that's the science. Let's switch gears and talk about the real world. How do doctors actually use this stuff in a hospital? What are the rules of engagement? First up, you can't get this as a pill. It is IV only, given just once a day in a slow infusion or drip. And the reason they can get away with that super convenient once-a-day dose, it's because the drug sticks around in your body for a while. It has a pretty long plasma half-life of about 9 to 11 hours. So let's look at the full profile of this drug in the body, because this is super important. One of its best features is how it's metabolized. It avoids that super crowded highway in the liver, the CYP450 enzyme pathway, that tons of other drugs use. And that is a massive win. It means way fewer traffic jams or drug-drug interactions compared to the azole antifungals. But it's not perfect. It does have one key limitation. It's not very good at getting into the brain or the eyes, which makes it a poor choice for something like fungal meningitis. So while it has fewer interactions, it's not totally in the clear. Doctors need to watch out for a few key players. With immunosuppressants like cyclosporine and tacrolimus, you have to monitor things very closely. And with some other drugs that can speed up metabolism, like rifampin, you might actually need to increase the dose of caspofungin just to make sure it's still effective.
Okay, let's pull all of this together. Time for the final verdict on caspofungin.
This slide really just lays it all out, side by side. In the win column, you've got this amazing specific target, fantastic coverage against Candida. It's way safer than the old school drugs, fewer interactions, and that awesome once-a-day dosing. But every drug has trade-offs, right? So on the other side, it's IV only, it can't get into certain parts of the body, it has some big gaps in its coverage, and yeah, it's expensive.
So when you weigh it all, what's the bottom line? Well, despite those limitations, caspofungin is an absolute cornerstone of modern antifungal therapy. Its unique mechanism and great safety profile have made it an indispensable tool for doctors managing the most severe fungal infections in their most vulnerable patients.
And that just leaves us with one big forward-looking question. Caspofungin was a revolutionary step, for sure. But fungi are smart, and resistance is a growing threat. So what comes next? What's the next new, even more specific target that the next generation of antifungal drugs is going to go after? That's a critical question for the future of medicine.